recorded, so I don't forget to do it later on. Okay, well, I have 1 o'clock. So welcome everyone. Let's see, where am I going to start here? Here's my introduction, right? Welcome back. If you were at this morning's, I just have to keep admitting people here in the chat to try to watch all these things. Yes, I will put the link in for the CEUs as soon as I get done with the introductions. The link for the CEUs will be in there as well as the evaluation. So just hang tight, it will be coming as soon as I get all this stuff done. Thank you for joining us for this special workshop with Dr. Nayla M. Khoury. Move on to my next slide here. Oops. Dr. Nayla M. Khoury and Dr. Maureen Ryan. My name is Stephanie Sosnowski, and I am part of the organizing team for this conference, which was made possible by Garnet Health, the Orange County Youth Bureau, and the Orange County Child Care Council. Before we begin, I would like to familiarize you briefly with the features here on Zoom. When you are not looking to say something in this meeting, we ask you to mute yourself to ensure optimal sound quality for all. You're welcome to leave your video feature on if you like. The video on, off, and the mute button, it can be found at the bottom of your screen as a microphone or a camera icon. If you have questions during the presentation, you can put those in the chat and we will be sure to respond there or during the interactive parts of the workshop. You can also show your appreciation or support of what you hear by using the emoji feature, which should also be at the bottom of your screen. Lastly, depending upon the device you are joining us from, you can choose your view. You can see multiple people on your screen in gallery view, or you can choose just this speaker in the speaker view. Please be aware that the session is being recorded. Please put your name in the chat if you'd like to receive continuing education credits, and I will provide a link at the end of the program that will allow you to receive your credits. So I'd like to start by introducing our first presenter. Dr. Khoury is an assistant professor of psychiatry at SUNY Upstate Medical University and the chief of the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Outpatient Clinic. She provides consultation and training for primary care providers through ProjectTeach, is involved in training of medical students, residents, fellows, NP students, social work, and psychology trainees. She graduated from Cambridge Health Alliance, Harvard affiliate for psychiatry residency, and completed fellowship training at University of Washington, Seattle Children's Hospital for child and adolescent psychiatry training. She's a certified yoga teacher and was a founding member of the Cambridge Health Alliance Center for Mindfulness and Compassion. Her clinical interests include fostering resilient youth, family and group-based therapies, and trauma and culturally sensitive care. Academic interests include well-being and equity in clinical education. Dr. Ryan is an assistant professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at SUNY Upstate Medical University and a liaison coordinator for ProjectTeach. Dr. Ryan has a private practice working with children, adolescents, and families, and has co-facilitated wellness groups for pediatric primary care providers. So we'd like to, presenters, would you like to just say hello a little bit? And we'll move on.
Hi there, happy to be here.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you.
Thank you. So we'd like to begin this workshop by showing a 9-minute video, which features several young people who participated in a program called Act for Change. This conference aims to center the voices of young people like the ones in the video, as we want to hear about some of their concerns, experiences, hopes, and aspirations, and the action they hope to take to help create a livable future for them. After the video, we will proceed with our presenters. So Caitlin, she's in charge now of getting the video going.
Stephanie, if you just don't mind, stop sharing, and then
I'm going. Yep, stop sharing. There we go.
Just 1 second. moment of getting it all loaded.
There are social work. Oops.
Can you see it? Yeah.
This is a coordinated activity happening across this nation. And so we are in a state of emergency. Black people are dying in a state of emergency. We cannot look at this as an isolated incident.
Such as redlining, which was a discriminatory practice against Black communities, and environmental justice.
So I was asked the question of what's next for me. I know we were given opportunities to go again in another act for change or another racism thing. I'd love to do that, you know. I'd love to just spread awareness about this. And hopefully next year, I want to apply to Cornell too. So it's like literally, this has been such a dream, and it's just really amazing to see what, you know, teenagers and the youth can do just for awareness and just for our communities, you know. I think it's important that we all know that, you know, that racism does exist. And we can change it, you know, no matter how young you are, you can do anything. So I hope that everybody realizes that. So I hope that answered the question.
I learned many different things from the Act for Change anti-racism program, but I think some of the most important things I learned were the many different ways and shapes that racism takes, and also how to effectively combat it through the use of mass movements and individual action. After this program, I'm going to continue my work in anti-racism leadership by trying to get more involved at a local level so that hopefully I can create change that takes us one step closer to ending racism.
Over the course of the Act for Change program, I've learned just how deep racism goes and how many things it affects. There are so many parts of our system that is built on racism and slavery, but now it's time to take action. It's time to use our knowledge on how to interact with situations where someone's being harassed and how to create a movement to help others educate themselves on their personal biases, and most importantly, uplift POC voices and stories, raising awareness for the current movements that are already happening all across the nation. I've learned how important it is to act for change.
Hi, I'm Olivia Kelly, and one thing that I learned from the Act for Change program is that big impacts can be made if a lot of people come together and stick together and work together. And one thing that I'm going to continue doing after the Act for Change program ends is advocating for racial equality on the Instagram account. And I encourage others to continue posting on there as well and taking part in that.
Some things that I were thinking of using, like the information and stuff that I've gathered from this program was, well, first of all, talking to like friends, and I have like this club that I started in my school that's like about promoting like social justice and activism, as well as like sharing different parts of different cultures and stuff. It's like Counterculture Club, I think it's called. Anyways, so I was thinking of like using some of the cool things that I've learned here to like help develop like presentations and stuff to help educate other people.
I hope that I can educate myself more, but not only myself, more like my peers and my family, so that I can have more supporters in changing like my school, or like not changing my school, but giving like a group where we can talk about this and bring it to other schools.
Well, what I'll do in the future is the knowledge that I've learned from this, I'll try my best to share it with others. And I would also take this as this great learning opportunity to do more things into learning about racism and the system and all that stuff, and like find more like deeper research upon this all, because learning about this has been like a really great eye-opener for me.
After this, I want to be able to use what I've learned through these two cohorts and be able to use it in everyday life, which I have been using. And I just want to like use my knowledge and be able to share my knowledge and be able to persuade people that racism is real and racism is still happening after all these years. And people might not believe me, but after these programs, I just think like I can change the world. So after like doing these, I want to be able to put my knowledge, put my time into making sure we all live happy and free.
Thank you. So it's great to hear the voices of these young people. And if anybody's interested in hearing more, of course, you can, you can look up the Act for Change program, and you can indicate on the evaluation that you want more information, and I'll post it at the end of the session. And just to let you know, tomorrow that Melinda Ware, who worked with the Act for Change program, is doing one of the workshops tomorrow also. I'm going to now pass the microphone on to Dr. Khoury because she is our presenter. So take it away, and I will continue to check the chat box for questions. And I don't know, Dr. Khoury, do you want to take questions as we go along, or you want to hold them to the end? What's your choice?
Thank you. Well, Maureen and I both would like this to be as participatory as possible. So
Okay.
welcome people to turn on their videos if they're able to, and we'll be going back and forth between presentation and pulling from the audience. So yes, please ask as we go. That would be great. All right, so invitation to turn your videos on, to let go of everything that came before, what comes next, and bring yourself into your space with us today as much as possible. Thank you for being here. I know there were a lot of great workshops, so we are glad that you chose to be here. I'm gonna go back and forth with the PowerPoint, but really do want to invite you in. Maureen, anything else before I bring up the PowerPoint?
I think that's a lovely job that you did.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. So let's start from the beginning. We're going to be thinking together about promoting resilience and talk a little bit about lessons we've learned in offering some wellness group for pediatric primary care providers during pandemic times. And that video we just watched together has reminded me, you know, we're talking both of COVID pandemic times and clearly the pandemic of racism and structural racism and discrimination that's come to the forefront for many of us. Clearly has been there even before this time, but is a part of promoting resilience and wellness. So thank you for the kind introduction. I guess just to say, in terms of my role, outside of the outpatient work I do, but the work with ProjectTeach. So ProjectTeach is a consultation for primary care providers that we offer both phone consultations and face-to-face consultations and training and education for providers across the state of New York. And we can happy to talk more about that, but this work came out of that project and what we were seeing during pandemic times of how primary care providers have been struggling, like many of us.
And maybe I can just hop in here if you would like, Nayla.
Yep.
Okay, great. And big thanks to Stephanie and to the Act for Change Teen Project. You know, it's really striking how like virtual programs like these can help young people and even caregivers feel connected or stay connected. And that's especially difficult during these pandemic times with so much uncertainty. And it's also a wonderful way to engage around pertinent issues. Here we saw the example of race and racism. Programs like this, you know, they also serve to empower participants. They create a space and structure that support the voice of adolescents. And it was interesting when you and I were talking earlier, Nayla, about how this is much the same way that we found the wellness group served to create a space and structure to help hold PCPs and give them a chance to find their voice.
Absolutely.
If you want to move to the next slide.
Yes.
So, you know, today, as Nayla mentioned, we'll be talking about our experiences in piloting wellness groups for pediatric primary care providers. And this is during the very early stages of the pandemic in 2020. Our objectives for today's workshop include: 1, reviewing specific stressors for patients, families, and providers during the pandemic. And that's including areas of shared or overlapping stressors experienced by patients and by the PCPs, and how this experience of overlapping stressors created a unique challenge for the providers. We'll also be discussing some of the process and content utilized in the wellness groups. And also in the workshop today, we'll talk about the tools that we used that are based on trauma-informed care framework. And we'll talk a lot about what trauma-informed care is a little later on. Also give you guys a chance to sample some self-care practices, and we'll review resources that were used to promote resiliency for families and for providers alike. as you kind of previewed a little bit for us earlier, Nayla, that the need for this wellness group became increasingly clear to us during our role with ProjectTeach and the phone consultation we provide to providers. And ProjectTeach is actually an OMH Office of Mental Health initiative, and it's designed to help PCPs manage pediatric mental health concerns in the primary care setting. And towards this end, we offer a variety of different types of services. I think you already had the chance to preview it, but just to kind of reinforce that. And I'm sorry we did not put up our phone number, although maybe if, can you put that in the chat for us, Nayla? If people want to ever use our service. Sure. I don't know if we have people who might be providers in the audience or people who would like to suggest our service to providers. And when we talk about providers, we're talking about nurse practitioners, PAs, physicians, a wide variety of different types of providers in primary care. So we offer behavioral health phone consultations. Often you can speak with, the provider can speak with a psychiatrist in less than 20 minutes turnaround time. Also, we have in-person psychiatric consultations where we can meet with the patients for one time and provide in-depth consultation. We also have quite a variety of types of trainings we do of different lengths, but all on core topics in pediatric mental health. And then we also try to facilitate linkage to resources in the community, whether it be more therapy resources, helping find an educational advocate, or other types of resources that might be needed by patients and their families. Now, during these phone calls that we're having with PCPs, we start to hear this very kind of unique strain that they were experiencing in this early part of the pandemic. This, just to remind you, because my gosh, it feels like the pandemic has been forever, or at least maybe for me, it feels like it's been a very long time, is that in the early part of the pandemic, there was just so much uncertainty, fear, lack of information. And PCPs were being called upon to be a source of reassurance and strength for their patients, but also the larger community. And this was quite a challenge when there was so little information for them to reassure families with. And the other piece we noticed is that while they were being called on to be a source of reassurance and strength, they were living the very exact same experience as their patients. And so this raised for us the question of where can providers be unsure? Where can they be vulnerable? And where can they be supported? And so our response to this question was to explore piloting wellness groups for PCPs. And again, the primary goal being one of promoting community, connection, and increased self-compassion for providers during this very difficult time.
Thanks, Maureen. People are writing in the chat introductions, but we will also in just a moment get to hearing who's here and what brings you here. So we'll get there.
Okay.
That's just a slide or two. So thank you guys. Go ahead.
Sure. And tell me when you want to hop in and do that, because I, from my view, have a little difficulty seeing the chat right now. So thank you very much, Nayla. Just to quickly overview the group structure here, we ran 2 sets of groups. Group 1 was in July of 2020. We used a 4-session drop-in open enrollment model. Each session was designed to open with and end with an extended mindfulness and compassion-based practice with a goal of helping to increase the well-being of the primary care providers. And then after we did each practice, we also allowed time to do some debriefing of what that experience was like, what did it bring up for the participants, and for them to have the opportunity to interact more with each other. During this first group, we also used like a model in the middle where we empowered participants to self-identify what experience or topic would be most beneficial to focus on. Now, it could be maybe a very challenging behavioral health case. It could be asking for extended mindfulness exercise, or it could be other special topics. During this first group, one of the participants who was a person of color self-identified wanting to talk about, how do I reassure my kids I'm safe when I go out and go to work? Her kids were literally crying as she would leave the house during this time of really heightened racial tensions, and they were in a very rural town. And I believe, literally in that little area, she was like one of the only, like very limited number of families of people of color. So it was quite powerful, and we were glad to be able to give her the opportunity to have a space to talk about this really difficult material and get support from other providers. And lastly, for the first group, we limited it to only Central New York, seeing how it's a pilot group. And we had approximately 10 to 15 PCPs joining us for each session. Now with group 2, we had a similar 4-session drop-in open enrollment model, but we did make some modifications, and these were based on feedback from the first group. And so we decided to include a more structured resiliency-based framework for the PCPs in their work with patients and families. We also offered shorter mindfulness and compassion-based practices to support provider resiliency. And we expanded it to the entire area of New York State. And we had on average 12 to 20 PCPs joining us. And for each group, we made sure to solicit their feedback through online satisfaction surveys. If you want to pop over to the next one, we can. So as a result of these surveys, certain group themes, or rather certain themes emerged about what was helpful for the group or what people experienced in the process of being a participant in the group. One of the key themes was self-care versus survival in a busy workplace. Now, we had anticipated that the additional time commitment of participating in the group might unintentionally amplify PCP's feelings of being overcommitted or overwhelmed, even though it was a wellness group. So we really try to be extremely mindful of like, what's the best time of day? How long should it be? And also thinking about the level of commitment, knowing their schedules can change on a dime. So that's in part why we use the drop-in open enrollment model. One of the things that we hadn't fully anticipated was the degree to which their busy schedules could even impact a PCP's ability to fully participate in the group process in that very moment. Let me explain that a little more because it was quite interesting. One participant shared, "I know I need this, but I can't switch out of this headspace." And she went on to talk about how if she wasn't 100% focused, head down, like only in the work zone, it would be highly unlikely for her to get home before 7 or even later to see her young children. And then she's kind of compromising time with her family, which was an important resource for her. So it kind of boiled down to, do I take care of myself at work and sacrifice time at home? Or do I, get to spend more time at home, but sacrifice wellness at work? So really how there are so many competing demands, even if it's something well met, like a wellness group. And we really just started to appreciate the tension that arises in developing groups to support these overworked providers. It also speaks to some structural issues within the primary care setting and healthcare overall that Nayla will touch on a little bit later.
Sounds good. Oops.
Do you want to pause for a second here? I have a little bit more if we wanted to add in, or we could pause here.
Let's pause. No, I just wanted to share. So one of the things we're trying to hold for everyone, I feel like there's parallel processes here. Everyone is busy right now too, trying to fit this into their busy work week. And so one of the frames that we were holding and quotes that I really like is thinking about whatever adversity we're facing right now and stress. And I know we're all feeling it. It sounds like I will invite people to turn on their video if they can and share who's here, but people are coming in from very different places and different roles as social workers, case managers, care managers, pediatricians in schools. Anyway, it is wonderful to see where people are coming from. And this quote, just to sort of start us off with, we can always practice the art of the possible. So this came from one of the family therapy journals that we pulled resources from when doing the trainings. Do all you can with what you have in the time you have in the place you are. So starting with that, did want to invite people to share a little bit about where they are right now, what brings you to this specific job, and what are some of the stressors that either teenagers you're working with are bringing to you, or caregivers that you're working with. Could be caregivers such as parents or providers in schools or in healthcare institutions. So would invite people to share out loud or on the chat if they're more comfortable.
If you're all shy, I can read what's in the chat. I can't believe we have a bunch of shy people here. Somebody speak up.
Well, I may just take a moment and that's okay. Brooke, did you want to share? Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, my name is Brooke Balchan. I'm a pediatrician. I'm actually a panelist tomorrow. So maybe I'll see some of you at that event. I'm a pediatrician in Westchester. I've worked in foster care. I've worked in school health throughout the whole region. I live in New Rochelle. So we were the epicenter. And with that, there was a tremendous amount of pressure professionally and personally. And I worked closely with community mental health through our county. And even though I wasn't with ProjectTeach at the time, I did find in our trauma focus group from the county, that was my outlet. And then I connected with some school health professionals. And it was really just, it took months and months and months after the pandemic started to really have that time to say, oh my God, I've been working 24/7. I haven't moved from this seat in my house because of all the administrative burdens. And I'm so lonely and I need my people. And so I've been doing resilience work for a long, long time. I've experienced significant traumas pre-pandemic. And so I think that connectedness is so important. And so I'm so glad to be part of this. And that's what I got to share so far.
Thank you for sharing and being here and speaking up about the work and the loneliness of isolation, because you are not alone in feeling that, right? I think that is actually a primary driver of holding the groups and holding groups in various spaces is the isolation, people feeling alone in this really hard time. Would anyone else like to share out loud? Thank you for sharing in the chat too. What I'm hearing. Oh, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to read this because I think that, sorry, I have to go back. I think Kelsey, no, I'm sorry. Somebody said that they don't have access to video or, vocal. So this is from Kelsey, right? Our parents face incredibly difficult socioeconomic stressors, food, housing, legal issues, etc., as well as the constant need for medical services for their children and threat of hospitalization, institutionalization, and or death. COVID has only exacerbated stressors, isolation, remote school, which doesn't work for almost all of our kids. Let me scroll down here.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So highlighting,
there's just a lot goes on.
That the pandemic really highlighted, stressors,
nurses available,
social problems that have been here from the beginning. Absolutely. And that mental health is a huge piece of this too. We'll jump back in just for the interest of time, but anyone else want to share out loud? You're welcome.
I'll just share quickly. I work at Cornell Cooperative Extension in Orange County, coordinate our Relatives as Parents program, which is kinship family focused. And so have really seen the impact on our families, particularly given that most of our caregivers are grandparents raising young children who are most at risk for the negative impacts of, COVID-19. And some of our folks had some really deep struggles with that. And we really saw kids who've already pretty much mostly been traumatized because they've ended up with their grandparents, usually not through the best reasons, really struggling with facing the potential mortality of their caregivers and what that meant for them, in addition to being isolated from peers and all of those kind of other things, kind of compounding those issues. So just interested in hearing more about all of this and trying to better serve those folks that we work with.
Right. No,
Really appreciate you sharing. It's just so poignant and really highlights just the layers and layers of stressors and traumas that these children have experienced, and just so much anticipatory anxiety that just overwhelms these young children.
One thing that I've really found, so I'm a general pediatrician and I also direct our foster care program. And in the foster program, we obviously see a lot of trauma, especially the past couple of years, but there, I feel like it's set up where I do have some support and there's a group of us who are going through similar things. And so even though there is a lot of trauma and we do hear horrible things, we have a little bit of this outlet and connection. Whereas in general pediatrics, you kind of hear something, handle something, have to deal with it, and then you just move right on to the next patient. Right. And there really isn't the same space there to deal with these more intermittent traumas that you don't even know are coming, that just kind of show up when you're in the room.
Absolutely. So well put. The structure isn't there to support it. And, where's the space to digest, to metabolize, to process, to get support. So let's jump into a practice to help us all be here right now, and something that, can be shared as well. So we use this reaching up, reaching down framework that was shared in one of the Family Journal Family Journals last year, which was focused on resilience and family resilience. And so this idea of reaching up, what are families and all of us pulling from in terms of philosophical, ethical, spiritual values, reaching down, how are we grounding ourselves in space and relationship with the environment? I'm constantly also finding myself in this funny box. And so how am I actually really taking care in part of my body, reaching inwards? And so we'll do a self-compassion practice just to start us off here. How are we figuring out what sustains us and really cultivating those practices that help us savor, find pleasure, and then connection. So reaching around in the context of pandemic isolation, how are we creatively staying connected to each other? And these are some of the reflection questions to consider. What are the essential components of a meaningful life? I think pandemic has brought a lot of these existential questions to the forefront. How do you retain hope and purpose in the face of so much stress and challenge? And what is your source for courage, hope, and faith? Yours personally, yours with your family, perhaps, or with your team of providers. And how do we maintain serenity and peace in these challenging times? A practice just to offer, I will invite you, if you'd like, you can turn your video off or you can keep it on, and just take a moment to connect to your body in space. You can stay seated or stand up if you're seated, or lie down, whatever would suit you right now. You can close your eyes if that's most comfortable. You can bring your hands on top of your heart or hold yourself in any way that feels comfortable. And just taking a few minutes to give yourself permission to tune in and notice what's here. So there may be a lot of thoughts and worries and planning, and you can invite it to slow down and connect with the body for a moment. Perhaps connecting with the breath if that feels comfortable, floor with any senses that feels comfortable. Could be feet on the ground, or where your hand is making contact with your body, and taking a moment to invite yourself to ask the question, what do I need right now? It might be a very concrete, tangible answer that comes to mind, or it might be something you need to hear, or something that you'd like to offer yourself. And if it works for you, for the next few moments as you're breathing in and out, just inviting yourself, inviting what it is you need to hear. It could be some kind words, could be just allowing yourself to have some quietness. Whatever it is, allowing yourself to breathe it in, and as you exhale, releasing something that you don't need to carry in this moment. And just taking another moment to notice how your body-mind responds to this gentle tuning in. And trying to release judgment if there's a lot of worries or a lot of judgments that do come up. And then on the next exhale, releasing the practice, allowing yourself to move or stretch in any way that would feel good. And we'll invite people just to share a little bit if they like what came up for them. Hopefully everyone didn't fall asleep on me, but maybe that's what people need, which is okay. Sometimes we need to tune out.
Nayla, I've been fortunate enough to hear you guide that particular practice multiple times, and I'm amazed each time how helpful it is to revisit it and slow down. And just, I can't identify what particular part of it, but I just think the process of slowing down, connecting with my body, and just those ideas of being compassionate to yourself are just so powerful. And they each time I'm so surprised by how helpful it is. So thank you. And certainly welcome hearing other people's thoughts too.
I think also asking ourselves what I need is probably a rarity of women having to, majority of us women, I guess, on the call, but we're always last on the list. So to kind of say, what do I need? Makes you, start to think a little bit, which you don't always think that way, I don't think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as caregivers, which we all are to some extent, and the different layers of caregiving, as perhaps as parents, perhaps as providers in some way. Absolutely. And is it okay to ask ourselves that permission? A lot of times what comes up for people is, like guilt. I have too much else, too many people who need me. Can I even give myself a moment to slow down?
Robin had a comment to share as well. It sounds like even in the noisy place where she is, there's a lot of background noise, how it was helpful just to take that moment to breathe and think about what I need.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. Well, we'll jump back in, kind of going back and forth to think about how can this be useful, these practices, to me or to where I work, to my team. We all know the pandemic has had a huge impact and a varied impact on many people and on our youth in particular, both in terms of families, economics, school, isolation. I don't have to tell you all that. And people have brought up trauma and sort of pre-existing stressors. So we know that this has been, the pandemics don't affect kids and families equally. And so specifically for our minority youth or youth with trauma histories, they're primed in many ways for experiencing events as traumatic. And so just a brief note, a little bit on trauma here. So many of you may be aware of the seminal ACEs study that is now pretty old, done in the 90s by Kaiser Permanente, that looked at different types of childhood adversity listed here in this box: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, and found that it's super common pre-pandemic. We know that a lot of kids and adults have had these experiences that are quite meaningful and have associations with mental health and physical medical health later on. We also know that outside of the home, trauma has a huge impact, whether it's community violence, bullying, or more relevant to here, perhaps, discrimination, racial trauma, medical trauma, traumatic grief, which I'm happy to talk about more at any time. And so, one of the outcomes of the study, which was at the time really quite profound, and many of you may know, but the graded association between number of adverse childhood experiences and negative outcomes for a whole host of disorders, from cardiovascular disease to stroke to Alzheimer's to suicide. And so if you have had 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, you're 37.5 times more likely to have attempted suicide. So right now, in this current state of youth mental health crisis nationally, we know kids are affected in many ways, and especially if you have childhood adversity to begin with. So this is just sort of to highlight, suicide has always been an issue for our adolescents as the second leading cause of death, that even before the pandemic, there's been rising rates among young Black youth that's still being uncovered in terms of etiology, but multifactorial and likely partly due to disparities in access and treatment. And then during pandemic, the rise of adolescent females in particular presenting to the emergency room for suicidality and suicide attempts. So this is sort of crisis times that we're all in, that we'd like to hold together. We can't remember. Okay, so, but the focus of this workshop and this conference is really on resilience. So what tips the balance in the context of so much adversity? How do we support resilience and think about protective factors and pull that and amplify it with our kiddos and families?
Sure, and if you want, I can jump in here for a little bit.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, and I was, boys, it's just so sobering when you hear those statistics around suicide and the many varied impacts of ACEs. So resiliency is really, something vital for us all to be thinking about how to foster it. In our second go around with the wellness groups, we selected that framework and focused on not only resilience, but family resilience, which most simply would be described as shared beliefs. But knowing that the family system is what holds adolescents and youth, by strengthening the family as a whole, we can also support well our adolescents. So kind of breaking down that family resiliency, we describe it kind of as the ability to make meaning of the crisis or the challenges. When I think of resilience, I think of immediately Viktor Frankl and his seminal book, Man's Search for Meaning. For those who might not know about this book, it really recounts his experiences in surviving 4 different World War II concentration camps and the role of meaning in helping him to maintain the will to live. He gave meaning to that experience by saying, I'm going to live because then I can testify to what happened. And that's really what sustained him throughout that really indescribable experience. As a result of his own experience, he developed a kind of a model for thinking about meaning and resilience. And he outlined 3 different ways to start to discover meaning, because it's not always easy to figure out how to do that. He describes performing deeds or creating something, basically the idea of taking action, sort of like that video that we saw earlier from the teens in the Act for Change video. Also, by coming in contact with someone or experiencing something, which again, more challenging during the pandemic, and why it's so important to find all these creative ways of maintaining connections. Also, by experiencing unavoidable suffering and then the attitude we take towards it. Now, in doing the groups, we came across some interesting work by a person named Walsh, and he kind of talks about it in a slightly different context, calls it transcendence. And transcendence is defined by Walsh as the ability to rise above suffering and hardship through larger values, spiritual beliefs, and practices, and experiencing transformation and new priorities and a sense of purpose and deeper bonds. Another key component to resilience of families is ability to gain or regain a positive, hopeful outlook that supports a sense of active agency, sort of that sense of like, we're a strong family. We've handled tough stuff before. We can handle this again. Now, in terms of the literature on resiliency, there is an interesting finding. It's really quite remarkable, the amount of consistency across different studies about what items foster resilience. And this extensive kind of review of the literature became the basis for what we call the Benevolent Childhood Experience Scale. And it's the one that includes questions that you see there, like, when you were growing up during the first 18 years of your life, did you have at least one good friend? Opportunities to have a good time? Any beliefs that gave you comfort? A predictable home routine? And now research shows that it can provide a buffering effect to stress and even the after effects of trauma, not only to the general population, but to really high risk groups. So it's pretty profound because really it means that a single caregiver that a child feels safe with, or at least one good friend, or the support of a neighbor, teacher, or adult can buffer all those really pretty scary ACEs we talked about before. One other way of saying it that I heard that really I just found very, just really struck a chord with me, is the saying that the power of one person to build another's resiliency. So the power of one person to build another's resiliency.
I love that, Maureen, right? And that highlights relationships, which is, you know, what we all probably know to varying degrees with our work is the key to all treatment, therapeutic relationships in school, after school programs, supportive adult relationships. Because when we think about the difference between normal stress and toxic stress, and which kids, you know, go on to have profound sequelae from trauma, it is the absence of a supportive caregiver that makes all the difference. And so that's where we can all feel empowered in terms of how are we supporting relationships. A lot of these protective factors can be applied also to the work that we are doing in our healthcare systems and communities for taking care of each other. We're all at high risk of burnout. Well, I'll just say for a moment, for the community piece, I think has been really challenging in the pandemic context where school and after school programs were not always available or had to be creative, such as the program that we heard about at the beginning, but such an important context, particularly for youth to feel a sense of belonging and to develop social and emotional skills. So I did want to, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sure. And while we're talking about children, the wellness groups were for adults, right? Yeah, for providers. And it was striking how really powerful connection was for them too. I remember, Nayla, that there's a provider from downstate and a provider from upstate that found something in common. And they actually decided after just 4 sessions together to get together and meet. I think they decided after like session 2 of the group, like we're going to meet during the next holiday or something, and how much just those connections really meant a lot to adults as well.
Yeah, that was very beautiful because some of it was being an isolated primary care provider in a rural community. And yeah, so absolutely. And I love Michael shared as well, encouraging every student in I believe, did Michael say he's in a high school setting? To have at least one relationship with an adult in the building. Absolutely. And so, you know, I'm thinking about how are we also applying this to our healthcare settings where our physicians, our nurses, our social workers here are all at high risk of burnout, and with good reason right now. And so some of the cultural transformations that we're working on within our institution is about well-being 2.0. What does that look like? 1.0 in the framework for well-being is really about surviving. And I think a lot of people are in survival mode right now with good reason. And in terms of thriving or shifting towards thriving, some of this is moving from thinking of physicians or healthcare workers or teachers even as like superhuman gods being asked to do more than they can, to humans with human qualities and vulnerabilities, who also need to be able to set compassionate limits for themselves. And so how do we uphold not just the providers going above and beyond, but also those people who can say, no, I actually have to go home and take care of my family or sleep, or, you know, saying no compassionately, setting limits and reasonable expectations about what we can do and offer. This Wellbeing 2.0 comes from a very nice paper by Shanna Feltz, who's one of our burnout experts in the field of healthcare. So highlighting some of the key components of self-compassion, work-life integration versus balance, and then how are we creating community and helping people connect with a sense of purpose and meaning. So just wanted to turn a little bit and share some of, go ahead, Maureen. Yeah.
No, just two thoughts is the idea of community within a system, and making those spaces is very important, and some of the initiative we're currently having at Upstate Medical University. But also it seemed in the group that there was something helpful about also having opportunities for community across different practices. That somehow within their own practice, you know, it was at times hard for them, maybe as, you know, if they're in a small practice and they're the only pediatrician, you know, and the only person in their particular role, that just being able to talk with other people in other practices and get their kind of shared experiences, pull on their, you know, kind of collective wisdom was really helpful to step out of their practice.
Absolutely, and speaks to what we know from the literature about supporting resilience and the importance of peer support as well, for all of us, really. And that's something that, you know, here at Upstate, we've had initiatives with other nearby institutions for creating that peer support for, if I'm in crisis, can I go to a colleague? So how do we build up all the different avenues to get help? And peer-to-peer is a huge piece of it. Where do I have mentorship? Where is that built in? And across institution, I think that's a really good point, and something that's nice about this space here that's brought us together. Yeah. So do we want to turn to the trauma-informed care model just to share?
I think that sounds great. Let's jump into that.
Share some of the tools from that you guys may or may not be familiar with, but I learned a lot actually this year. So from our piloting the wellness groups, kind of the next initiative that we took on from that is learning more about trauma-informed care and as an approach, and we'll talk about and piloting that within a pediatrics practice, for example. And so a lot of similar principles. So these are some of the principles to a trauma-informed approach, which can be applicable to any system, can be a school, healthcare system, but really thinking about safety first and foremost, building trust and transparency. The thing about this approach, not just clinically, but really to a whole system of care, thinking about how our policies are, whether they're trauma informed or sensitive, focusing on collaboration from the get-go, whether it's treatment planning to working collaboratively to figure out how do we transform what's needed in our systems to support people, focusing on empowerment, voice, and choice, and being mindful of cultural, historical, and gender issues. So that's a lot. These are just some kind of clinical examples of how we might apply some of the strength-based approaches. So encourage, when we're meeting with any family, really asking about chief complaints or symptoms in the context of a relationship. So how do we build that relationship? How do we build and learn about a kid or family's strengths? So tell me about yourself. What are some things you're proud of? What are your parents really proud of? And many other ways to join teens, families, and have people share with us some of the positive aspects. So in terms of talking about resilience, I mean, some of it is putting out there, this has been hard for a lot of people in different ways. So what helped your family get through this? What helped you get through this? And on the bottom there is another way to think about and ask about intergenerational trauma and resilience. So what are the things that you've passed on to your children from your own childhood that were so good you wanted to bottle them up and feed them? And what have you worked hard to protect your children from, or your teens? I'll pause for a moment and just ask briefly, because we shared at the beginning a lot about the stressors and what's brought us here in the work, but I am curious if people would like to share out loud or in the chat, what are some key components that have supported your resilience or your organization's resilience that we can just share together. I see in the chat two comments. One is, yes, so people meeting up after meeting up online, which is a beautiful example. And then Sanctuary Institute as a great resource for organizational change. And work culture. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Whether it's an individual, relationship, systems, community, so stay in connection with colleagues. Yeah, absolutely. And we're just talking as a group with my staff here who are definitely feeling the stressors of burnout. Are we meeting regularly enough? How do we balance making time to meet more with the demands of work and wanting to go home at a reasonable hour? So how do people meet and stay connected? Okay, we'll turn back to this and invite you to interrupt me at any time. So these are, the 4 R's of the trauma-informed care framework, and just wanting to emphasize really resisting re-traumatization, wherever possible. So anytime we're talking about stress and trauma or leading any of these self-compassion practices, frankly, we're trying to be mindful of not re-traumatizing people, because we don't ever know really what's going to trigger someone, whether it's focusing on your breath or the way you enter a space or, language that we use. So part of what we have been talking about through these trainings with ProjectTeach is, how do we even ask about stress and trauma in a way that's developmentally appropriate and sensitive? So these are some kind of screening questions that we might use. Has there ever been a time where you were scared for your own safety or someone else's at home, at school, in the community? And really the most important piece being, if we're going to ask about stress and trauma, we have to make space to be able to validate when we hear a positive response and follow up, and of course report if necessary. And so some ways we might validate is really just acknowledging that what we heard was stressful and potentially traumatic, and that we're here as a listening ear or caregiver to try to help support someone, or if you're in the healthcare profession, talking about how it's important to know about people's traumatic experiences or stress, because it can continue to affect people's lives and health. So it's part of an ongoing conversation. So before we jump into a practice, I just was wondering, any questions, thoughts, comments? And please, people have different expertise that they're coming from, so would love to hear. Normalize, absolutely. Absolutely. Some of the ways I like to normalize when I'm doing my clinical exams is by mentioning, you know, many of the kids or families that I see come to me with X, Y, and Z. Is this something that you've experienced? And trauma is traumatic stress is one important piece of it. Other ways that you like to normalize or validate? Or that others have found helpful? Looks like someone's trying to connect to audio. Maureen, what about you?
I think it varies some on the situation and the age of the child, and try to be sensitive to developmental piece. But really, I think it's just the, you know, you're not alone. Just those small words are so powerful. You're not alone. Others have experienced this. I really want to know what this has been like for you. You know, so both, you know, normalizing and yet being sensitive to they may have their own unique experience, and that we don't want to minimize what this has been like for them personally. So kind of balancing those two pieces. But I'm amazed at how powerful just you're not alone.
Absolutely. Kelsey's saying groups are great, but not feasible during COVID in our setting, and may or may not be feasible. It's been interesting to see how different programs have adapted virtually. So our intensive outpatient program that just started last summer had to start for the most part all virtually. And, you know, doesn't work quite as well, but for some you make it work, or you try to figure out how am I going to engage people in this way as much as possible. And yeah. Well, we can jump into just a quick practice and think together about how this applies to your work or some of the situations you may be seeing. Yeah.
And just a quick thought, Nayla, I'm noticing time has gone so fast. It's been so enjoyable having everyone here this afternoon. And it's 2:06. Do we want to jump into the role play here, or would you like to move on to something else?
It's totally fine. We can either do the role play, Maureen, or just talk about.
Let's hop in. No, yeah, I'm fine. Let's jump into it then.
Okay, sounds good. So Maureen is going to be Maria, a 27-year-old teacher coming to me as the consultant or principal, or
as my primary care, I think.
Oh, primary care. Okay, well,
yeah.
That's a different hat. Overwhelmed by 9-year-old's behavior in class. Okay, so Maria, what's been going on?
Oh, I'm just having a really tough time with sleep lately. I'm just exhausted, but yet, you know, I can't sleep. I don't know. I thought maybe I'd talk to you. I don't know if I need a pill or something.
Yeah, lots of people have been struggling with sleep lately. And can you tell me a little bit more about some of what might be precipitating sleep issues for you?
Oh, I honestly, I don't know. It's just like everything is just, I can't even think of what to say or answer because there's just so much going on. Honestly, I guess maybe when I lay down and my brain just won't shut off. A lot happening at school. I don't know if you remember, I'm a teacher.
Yeah, well, I can only imagine what it's been like for you as a teacher right now. And you're saying that it's hard to shut off your brain at the end of the day, or your body.
Yeah, you know, and it's amazing to me because I'm just so worn out. There's this 9-year-old, you know, I feel bad. I know I think his grandmother is in the hospital and likely to die from COVID, and his parents are there full time, but he is just out of control. He's so aggressive with other kids. I don't know how to take care of this group in the classroom and yet take care of him. And my God, you know, no matter how much I ask for help from the administration, there's like a social worker, like, you know, there's nothing out there for them now. It's just horrible.
managing a lot right now, worried about this young kiddo and also your whole class in terms of what's been going on. And it sounds like you have some awareness there might be some stress at home too that might be contributing.
Well, you know, here's the kicker. Like, I have a out of control classroom, trying to protect all the other kids from this one kid, can't get help. And then what do? I go home to be a teacher to my kids. I'm like, like they're all remote. What am I gonna do? Gotta help them. Oh my gosh, they can only get so much done on their own. It's just a continuous, I feel like all of it's out of control, to be honest.
Yeah, feels like a lot that you're holding right now. I wonder how I can support you without being able to necessarily fix the classroom situation or the home situation. I wonder what might be helpful right now.
Well, I can say you're the first person to ask me that. At school, I just hear from the administration what they can't do, not what do I want. So, that's a tough one, but maybe just sleep. I think I can do everything better if I just could get some sleep.
Oh goodness, I have no doubt. Okay, we're gonna pause for a moment and just ask for observations and reflections, both in terms of this scenario and what comes up for you in watching this scenario, in terms of supporting Maria with all the layers of what's going on and trying to support her resilience. What do you guys think?
Wow. That's a lot to deal with.
I have to admit, I was feeling that that pull at the end. Well, here, just prescribe a pill for sleep.
I was waiting for the answer.
Let's make it all better. Here, take a pill. Take some melatonin. Thank you, Brooke. Well, I was taking a breath for myself and for her, bring in a behavioral consultant to work with the teacher. Yes, great point. Maureen, I originally thought that I was a school supervisor, so it's a little bit of a different role. But yeah, I mean, part of it is that she has a lot of different needs, and certainly, trying to sort out with her, what are the different supports that could help her manage her own real stressors in the school, and then potential burnout. Any other observations or thoughts? So this
reminds me just real quickly of the first group, which was mostly rural central New York folks who had such a scarcity of resources, and it's just legitimately real. So a lot of brainstorming, what could they do in pinch hit, but it's asking them to do more. And then I think just having them be with others who understand that idea of like, well, there isn't anything, and what it's like just to hold that experience, right? Because sometimes there's not easy solutions, and just to have others who are in that same space and can really truly let them know they're not alone was really powerful.
I was just going to mention how relatable scenario feels over the course of the last year. So not that I have an answer, but I think a lot of folks, including those of us on this call, can probably relate to feeling like you're balancing all of those different things, and the sleeping pill may not be the solution, right? But it feels like I just need like the magic bean, that makes it all better, which is easier said than done, of course.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm using a headset that I never use. I was just thinking how we have an untapped population, and I wonder if we could tap into this population. If we're talking about those of us who are working, and maybe some people are balancing kids at home and our own lives or our own parents. But what about older adults who are retired, who might want to be helpful and useful? And we could meet two needs simultaneously, the need of those people to be useful during difficult times and to help alleviate some of the distress, and not necessarily because they're going to jump in and do the work for other people, just to be a support to the people who are doing the work.
That's a wonderful thought.
Yeah. Yeah, what a beautiful idea and example. And I think for lots of people, even though it was adding more on their plate, the sense of, volunteering to do crisis COVID hotlines or peer support, or frankly, our wellness groups, which I, was doing in a number of different settings for colleagues, for trainees, for PCPs, is like, that fills my cup to feel like I have a place where we can support each other. And so, yeah, I think that that's a wonderful idea. I wonder if anyone has examples of using something like that. AARP and Fordham University, Westchester. Thank you, Kelsey, for putting that in the chat. Yeah, no, absolutely. How to connect people who are feeling isolated and without a sense of purpose to those who are holding too much right now. Well, some of the reflections together, just to think about is partly as I was even just doing this example, imagining myself as a PCP with limited time and sitting here with Maria thinking, how much do I want to get into this? How much can I really hold for her? How do I take care of myself at the same time that I actually do want to be a listening ear for her? And that's a hard duality, oh, I have 10 things I have to get to, but can I pause and support her, listen to her? Do I have time for that? How do I actually get support from the others in my busy practice so I can make a little extra time here? So I am wondering whether you're working in schools or otherwise, what are some of the system changes that are being worked on or advocated for to do this important work, but also take care and prevent burnout from those on the front lines? I'd love to hear from those of you in it. Initiatives geared towards staff wellness. I wonder if any of them have been helpful, and if you wouldn't mind sharing some. People can certainly think about it and add as they go, and we can finish sharing kind of our learning from the TIC model real quick, but please, again, feel free to interrupt me here. So, part of this is from the TIC model and framework. So these are individual strategies to support resilience. But then how are we doing this within the context of a team and a community that allows you to set boundaries and say no, and get mentorship? This is just, so the TIC training and structure we provided through ProjectTeach, another pilot this year that will likely continue again, is offering 4 different modules, an hour each, 2 of them for the entire staff, because TIC as a framework and resiliency work is partly about involving everyone, not just clinicians, but admin support, nurses, LPNs, to feel part of a team, but also to be mindful that we all can be traumatized and triggered, and also supports for each other. And then the second 2 modules were for clinical staff only. The goals were partly to foster community, improve policies, procedures, workflow, and think about resilience through the TIC framework.
And that framework was very well received. When we looked at the surveys from both office staff and providers, over 96% felt really confident they could implement the TIC principles. And if you want to pop down to the next slide there, Nayla, we had the opportunity in the outcome surveys to try to solicit feedback from participants in their own words. And you'll notice there we have a series of examples of some of the ones that we pulled from that feedback. And it's really talking about ways they might try to implement TIC in their daily life. Now, let me just kind of highlight one or two that popped out for us. One person talked about, I'm going to walk into every situation with a clean slate and try not to bring past experiences with the same patient to a new visit, which would seem pretty powerful to talk about. Not only am I going to try to shift and clean my slate between this patient and the next patient, but even within the same patient to have the opportunity for fresh starts. And also just the real value of checking in with themselves and taking time during the day to let go and stay grounded so that they could be more present both for themselves and for their patients. On the next slide, I think there's also some discussion about, awareness of others' experiences, stepping out of yourself and being able to take a look at from the very first point of contact, the intake at the office, how can we be more trauma aware, trauma sensitive, and even noticing body language and ways to foster a safe work environment. We also kind of asked for a little feedback, if on the next slide, about what we would call takeaways, right? And so the feedback we got.
Maureen, I think I'm out of sync with you, but anyway, keep going.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Yeah. Are you? I don't know where you might be. Are you on 45 or 46? Takeaways and next steps.
Go for it.
Okay, cool. So we talked about two key themes emerging. That one, the strategies for enhancing well-being can be taught. I think one PCP said it as, TIC helped them learn specific breathing and relaxation skills that they can use for themselves and teach their patients, and how valuable of a takeaway that was. That's very teachable. And the other key theme is that TIC can really actually be simple as stop, breathe, or empathize more with families. And then I think you already highlighted, Nayla, the idea of looking at how to generalize these TIC principles to other settings and looking at things at a policy or procedural level. Excuse me. So Nayla, you want to take over here?
Yes. I'm just reading some of the comments people shared as well.
Oh, beautiful.
I think, well, it gets to, so kind of reflecting together. But maybe before we do that, let's just take a moment as we're towards the end of this I'll just offer the 2 feet, 1 breath practice, which I love to use throughout the day. And if you like, I haven't moved my body much at all today, but taking a moment just to notice your feet on the ground. If you'd like to invite any movement or even just looking around and not just at the screen, inviting anything that your body might need right now. So 2 feet, 1 breath, and proceeding to the next and final part of our workshop, which is thinking together about what elements of this are you already using in your work and what's needed to amplify it. I think someone mentioned here that many systems are still stuck in pre-pandemic mindsets. Absolutely. And so I guess I wonder in what ways you're seeing that in your own work, what's needed to shift that. I know here in our healthcare system, we're still advocating for, okay, if we're now moving to be able to offer telehealth for our clients, for example, can we offer telehealth for our staff too? And for whatever reason, there's lots of reasons, there's been a lot of pushback and resistance. So how can we learn some of the positives from the pandemic? And yeah, so what is a pre-pandemic mindset? Brooke, I'm curious if you wanted to share more.
Or so I just want to, I don't want to divulge too much about my personal situation. I could speak for my husband and his environment. I think some employers have been very reluctant to continue actually federally protected rights of people. And so there is an uptick of people who have had ADA rights or FMLA rights that have been violated by their employers through this. And so it's a matter of advocating for yourself, creating continuity in your own workspace that had given you value. Maybe during closures, everybody was remote. And then as they brought people back, they were not continuing accommodations that they thought were necessary because of their own belief systems. And that has caused conflict. And I think that that is something that, people are battling with. And school systems are certainly contributors of just bringing everybody back, wanting to return to normal. And there are many, many people that have suffered because of discrimination based on their own disabilities.
Yeah, very good points. Thank you for bringing that up. Others experiencing that or have observations to share?
We have a comment from Caitlin. I'm thinking acting as though this is temporary and things will magically return to normal. So talking about flexibility is very temporary terms and the impact on staff and clients as if it is temporary.
Right. And instead of, yeah, instead of thinking more long-term about what transformations are needed for what might be here for a while. And how do we use this opportunity to really promote more resilient systems? So I know telehealth work and as one example of more work-life integration is something we are talking about a lot and working on advocating for. I know there was a question Alicia put up above, what are resources any resources for ways I can best support other healthcare providers and staff given my own time and resource limitations, which is like, that is, I think that question sums up a lot of the issues right here. So how do we support ourselves and our staff given limited time, limited resources? So I'm curious if there's any takeaways based on some of what we've shared today, or thoughts, Maureen, that you'd like to share as well.
Yeah. The parallel process is just so striking for me, that here we're talking about caring for PCPs. How do we care for ourselves? Brooke, I really resonated to what you said about school districts and that they seem to have sort of a desire to be back to normal. And so all kids, regardless of specific circumstances, are returning, and remote learning, at least in our district, is no longer available. So it just seems like there's just so many different roles where we're experiencing this strain. Yet I'm amazed at just having the opportunity, even in this format today, to talk and hear from others. I'm just so impressed by also the resiliency, the strength, the caring that just comes across even in this small transaction with this group. Has been really quite striking and really a pleasure to hear from you guys. And what wisdom you guys have. I'm impressed.
Absolutely. And part of me feels pulled to provide resources right away. So we're always happy. Feel free to contact us separately. I think ProjectTeach has some good resources that we've now put for providers specifically. I know on our well-being website, which is in evolution and not very pretty at this time, there are support lines depending on what type of provider you are. There's crisis lines, there's suicide prevention supports, there's peer supports. There's a lot out there, but I guess the question is really for your colleagues and teams, how do people feel supported? How do they have mentors? Where do people feel like they can go to feel less alone? And to feel what rituals can the team do and create to support each other in this time? I don't think there's any one size fits all.
And Caitlin, will we be able to distribute to everybody the slide deck so that they have our contact information if they want additional resources or have questions?
So this was recorded and folks will get shared the recording. So they should have it.
Okay.
But I think additionally, you would probably send it to Yulica and she'll probably share out the links to all of the recordings and any additional materials that folks need.
Okay. And we certainly welcome people contacting us.
Let's try to get that eval in there again.
Yeah, I just, thank you. So everything is being saved in the chat, so it will all be available. And as Caitlin said, everything is recorded. So all of the workshops that you're missing that are going on simultaneously to this one, you will have available to watch anyway. I don't know why the link doesn't work to the evaluation. That's what I was given. So we'll figure all that stuff out, and we have your contact information so we can get back to you. So lots of stuff being going up there on the chat. Let me make sure that I'll save it all. I'll make sure it all gets saved.
It is working. It opens in another browser, Steph.
Yeah, so yeah, it said, oh, I got you. Okay, Susan, thank you.
So when you click on it, it pops up on, in another
browser. Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
So lots of good information being passed up there. Oh, AAP. Okay, cool.
Just some
awesome.
resources.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was really wonderful, and it was a small group, but I think it really helped to have people be able to share their thoughts and their feelings. Dr. Ryan, Dr. Khoury, thank you so much for your time and inspirational work that you're doing. I wish it was all going to be over soon, but I don't think it will. This is going to impact us for the rest of our lives, I would imagine, and for the kids who are living through this. We can just do the best we can to support them and give them the resources and the benevolent childhood experiences as much as we can to pile up those rocks for them on the other side against their adversity. So anyone have any final thoughts, comments, questions, anything before we close? Okay.
So much. This is great.
I'm going to stay on and just to make sure I capture everything in the chat, and thank you all for coming. Tomorrow we have more. Tomorrow morning, let me see, I picked this up here. Oh, I saved it and now it's gone. So tomorrow morning at 10:30 is the panel discussion, Youth Mental Health, Wellbeing and Growth After 2020. We have some wonderful presenters for that. And then there are workshops tomorrow afternoon. I'm sure you've all registered for them already. Compassion, fatigue awareness, healthy relationships from lived experience, building a community-driven early relational health model, and then the Act for Change, which we saw a little bit of the video today. So check your emails for all your links and everything to join the discussion tomorrow. And thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Nice to see some of you again, Susan. Dr. Pointer.
So I saved the chat too, so I'll
good.
Drop it into a Word document and share it with
good
in case we missed anybody for the CEUs.
Yeah. So I guess I didn't really look because I'm not a social worker to get the CEUs, but somebody, well, I guess when they clicked on the link, they said it wasn't the CEUs for social workers. And when I clicked on it, it looked like it was a link to for Dr. Gonzalez for her presentation. So there might be some mix up with the links.
Okay. All right. I'll let Yulika know that.
Yeah,
too.
you know, we can fix it after the fact. So
Yeah.
people will get their things. So I know she said
Okay,
she applied for the social worker contact hours. So
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Alrighty, it all works.
Nice to
Very
see you.
good. Very good. And the recording went to the cloud someplace, so I guess Yulika will take care of that.
Yes, she'll be able to grab it from there. I think.
Okay. All right. Bye.
The magical cloud.
The magical cloud. Bye.
Bye.